We interrupt your regularly scheduled programming with an update on Hurricane Milton. I'm Roches.
And I'm Juan Chaoui. Thank you for joining us. Right now in Ocala, Governor Ron DeSantis is addressing the state less than 36 hours before the storm is expected to make landfall along Florida's west coast. Let's listen in.
Milton. This storm is expected to make landfall on the Florida Peninsula, the west coast of Florida, sometime late Wednesday evening, maybe early Thursday morning in the wee hours is kind of where it's looking now, but it has moved a little bit slower than projected over the last 36 hours. There is still a lot of uncertainty about where exactly the eye of the storm is going to hit. I think the most recent models have it somewhere in Manatee County, just south of Tampa Bay. But I would just tell people, one, there's going to be impacts far beyond wherever the eye of the storm is. Two, you could make landfall anywhere from Citrus County down into southwest Florida. We'll know more over the next 12 to 18 hours, but just cones, all this stuff you see, the impacts will be broader than that, particularly with respect to storm surge on the west coast of Florida. I know that there's a lot of folks who have evacuated, who are in those areas, and you absolutely could get whacked with really serious storm surge. Really, almost every place on the west coast of Florida could get major storm surge. Today I held a joint call with state legislative leaders and the cabinet to brief them on Florida's efforts on the storm and about our resources that are being offered and being utilized by the state of Florida. We also did a similar call to Florida's congressional delegation. I've also spoken to the president and the FEMA administrator. We've had our request approved for pre-landfall. We will get a landfall, major disaster declaration approved once the storm hits, and that will be things like debris removal and individual assistance. We still have 51 counties that are under a state of emergency. There's pretty much warnings or watches on almost the entire Florida Peninsula. A lot of attention is being paid to the storm surge on the west coast of the Florida Peninsula, and rightfully so, because that's probably the most serious threat to people's lives and property. But this storm is going to go across the Florida Peninsula, and it's going to exit on the east coast of Florida into the Atlantic Ocean, likely still as a hurricane. So that is going to bring significant impacts all across the state. So just be prepared for that. That may mean mobile homes, even interior, other structures that may not be hurricane proof, that could create hazards, rivers, other bodies of water. As you have more rain and you have flooding, that could be an issue. And then you could have surge on the east coast of Florida. You could have erosion. You could have different things with the coast. So this is not just an event about the west coast of Florida. That will be where the initial impacts and probably the most significant, but the impacts will not be limited there. So here we are at the Florida Horse Park. We have staging areas around different parts of the state. And there are different sites that are doing different things. I mean, for example, you go to like Lake City, you got a lot of the utility linemen there that are staged. We've had a lot of people staged in the Tampa Bay area for utility and other things. But this one right here is really good. I'm not saying Ocala is not going to have any impacts from the storm, but we fully anticipate be able to move people where they need to go very quickly once the storm passes. And we have different partners that the state contracts with. They have personnel. I think as you see, they camp out here. This is where they are, and then they're able to respond. We got massive amounts of equipment here. Things, land, air, sea vehicles, supplies, generators, equipment, bucket trucks, you name it, this stuff is here. And so this is just one of many sites that are ready to go. The reason why we do state of emergency, we did it over the weekend on Saturday. We knew the storm wasn't likely to hit until middle of the week at the earliest, because you want to start amassing these resources, and that's what we've done. I think it's been really, really important. So on this property, you got over 2,000 pieces of equipment, including a lot of pumps, a lot of generators, light plants, display boards, restroom trailers, laundry trailers, forklifts, air conditioning units, electrical equipment, water hoses, bunk trailers, and rollback trucks. 400 personnel here including riggers, equipment operators, pump crews, and drivers. Fuel trucks are also here to be deployed as needed. Florida DEM is currently in the process of completing 1,200 missions. So far you're looking at deploying hundreds of thousands of shelf-stable meals, hundreds of thousands of water bottles, hundreds of thousands of sandbags, a lot of tarps and a lot of generators, and many other things. And so that is being resourced to the counties. And then of course we also have staging areas that we'll do with our pods once the storm passes. We have utilized flood protection devices in areas to protect against storm surge. We've now deployed more than 11,000 feet of those Tiger dams. That's really important to protect hospitals, wastewater facilities, and electrical infrastructures. Of course, we've been outfitting counties for years now with Starlink internet, so that's going to be available to be used as needed. In terms of fuel, we amassed a lot of fuel before this particular emergency. We actually had it for Helene, didn't really need to use it for that. We have 268,000 gallons of diesel, 110,000 gallons of regular gas on standby. That's just from the state. You still have the fuel at the ports that are being brought in. But then we also have another 1.2 million gallons of both diesel and gas that are currently en route to the state. Now I know there's been a lot of lines at gas stations. You obviously have an inordinate demand for fuel, much more than would typically happen. What's happening is there's long lines, the gas stations run out of fuel, but the fuel supply is available, so then they ask for more fuel to be brought. And so what we're doing is we've authorized Florida highway patrols to escort with the siren, so they get there quicker, major fuel trucks. So we've had 43 fuel trucks that have already been escorted by Florida Highway Patrol to deliver fuel to stations, particularly in the anticipated impact area. We're also working with companies like Circle K, Gate, Racetrack, Wawa, Shell, and Walmart to ensure fuel trucks are working 24/7 to keep fuel delivered as it comes into our ports. There's no longer fuel coming in to some of the West Coast ports like Tampa and Manatee, but they've got a lot of fuel there on dockside that is going to continue to be used. And I spoke with both ports of Tampa and Manatee today, and they've got a lot of fuel. So that's continuing to happen. And then fuel has been coming into East Coast ports. That's probably going to stop soon. Maybe it's already stopped now. But again, there's a lot of fuel that's on hand that can be brought out on the dockside, and that's what we're looking to continue to see happen. Debris removal from Hurricane Helene. I think most people know the counties and the cities, they have contracts for debris removal after a storm. There was not necessarily great job all around on some of the contractors in places like Manatee, Sarasota, Hillsborough counties. We saw this debris once it was clear there was going to be some type of storm this weekend. We decided to create a state support debris mission. And what we've done is we've mandated the landfills are open 24 hours. We had one county where they didn't have anyone there manning it. We opened it up forcibly, make sure that debris can be brought in. So that's Florida Department of Transportation. They've now deployed over 300 dump trucks, so they'll work to remove debris 24/7, and they're going to continue to do it all day today and as long as they can tomorrow before we start to feel impacts from the onset of the storm. So as of this morning, Florida Department of Transportation has removed over 1,300 truckloads of debris in a little over 48 hours. That's a huge, huge amount. Now, there was issues, so the most debris was probably in the Pinellas County beaches. You also had Manatee, the barrier islands like Anna Maria, a lot of debris. That was our initial focus. Sarasota also had a lot of debris on their barrier islands, and I guess their contractor kind of left them holding the ball. So we've now surged over 100 FDOT vehicles between Manatee and Sarasota working to step in where the contractors left off. And we're going to continue doing that again all the way until it's no longer safe to do so. We've made a huge dent in this. The more debris we can get picked up, the less damage is going to happen, whether that's floating into the Gulf of Mexico, whether it's projectiles that go into other buildings. We have hundreds of state search and rescue personnel, a total of 26 teams embedded in potential impact sites along the West Coast to begin immediate rescue operations as soon as the storm passes, should the need arise. I know a lot of people have left, and hopefully there's not a need for a lot of rescues, but those personnel will be there if they need. We have 5,000 National Guard that are on duty. That'll expand to 8,000 very, very soon. We have a total of 34 search and rescue aircraft. We've gotten a lot of support from other states, and we thank them for that. We have 450 tactical vehicles, including 140 high-wheeled vehicles, aerial, water, and ground National Guard search and rescue teams. This is probably the largest National Guard mobilization in advance of a storm in Florida history. We also have the Florida State Guard, 10 maritime crews, 3 high-water UTVs, 2 UH-60 Blackhawks, 4 drone teams, 15 cut and toss crews, 2 amphibious rescue crews, and almost 200 Florida State Guard soldiers. Linemen and power restoration resources are being marshaled. We now have over 43,000 linemen who are being brought in from as far away as California, so we appreciate them for power restoration. We've also assisted with the evacuation of 300 healthcare facilities in the potential path of the storm. State veteran nursing homes that are currently located in the cone are accepting families of residents to shelter with them, as they are all built to withstand Cat 5 hurricane winds, and they're outside of flood zones. Florida Disaster Fund. This was activated after Ian, Idalia, and Helene. If you want to support for Milton, go to floridadisasterfund.org. This is really, really significant way to help people. You should be executing your plan now. If you're going to get out now. You have time today. Time will be running out very shortly if you wait any longer. Of course, there's a lot of mandatory evacs that have been done. We have done the shoulders on the I-4 and the I-75. Veterans Expressway and Suncoast Parkway tolls have been waived. Those can also be used as evacuation routes. I-4 is doing a lot better today than yesterday. Still traffic, but that's it. That's the norm for that. I-75 northbound, 20 to 30% higher volumes. Alligator Alley is pretty jammed right now. We have an unprecedented effort underway. I want to thank everyone that's been involved. It's not easy, especially when you've just responded to a Category 4 storm, Helene, to have it done. I know everybody's tired. Trust me, we get it. We're wearing out the Celsius at the state EOC, but what you're doing is important. Hang in there and let's get the job done. Okay, Kevin?
Thank you, Governor, for your leadership and commitment that we had the resources that we need to respond to this unprecedented event. The State Emergency Response Team continues to work on more than 1,000 missions that the Governor's already mentioned. We will continue to fulfill these requests 24/7 as we prepare for landfall. Once the storm has passed, we have tens of thousands of resources staged and ready to deploy to the impacted communities as soon as it's safe to do so. Life-threatening storm surge is expected along Florida's west coast. Storm surge values shown in some areas could exceed 15 feet. Counties from Levy to Collier have ordered mandatory evacuations, and I urge you to heed those warnings if you're in one of those zones. By now, I hope you know whether if you live in an evacuation zone or not. But if you do not know, please go right now to floridadisaster.org/know and find out if you live in an evacuation zone. If you are in a mobile or a manufactured home or in a low-lying flood-prone area, it is never safe to stay in that situation, no matter what year it was.
Again, that was Governor Ron DeSantis speaking out of Ocala. Let's wrap this up a little bit.
Yeah.
So Governor Ron DeSantis started with explaining the current state of the hurricane. He said, I mean, as you could tell there, it was so windy, his jacket was flowing in the wind. So the storm is starting to pick up right now. He emphasizes the surge and the flooding. So that's what viewers should really know. That's the main idea. There's going to be a lot of that, whether you're on the West Coast or on the East Coast. It's just going to hit Florida like straight. And yeah, he explained that. And
well, he also said that it's expected to make landfall starting around tomorrow evening, Wednesday evening, or Thursday morning, depending on how it goes. It's slowing down a bit. He also said that there are 51 counties in Florida right now under a state of emergency. So that's something to look out for too, in case your county is one of many, more to come, just in case. He says that the impacts will be felt all across Florida because it may be starting in just the West Coast, and that may be the worst part hit, but places with rivers nearby, any bodies of water, those can be a little dangerous too. So watch out for some storm surge there. He's got lots of utility linemen lined up, ready to help in case of emergency right after the storm. Those will be on there. And anyways, we're going to be sending it off to Matthew Clark here in studio to track the weather a little bit on what the storm is going to bring.
Yeah, the storm is expected to really gain size as it makes its way towards the Florida's Gulf Coast. Right now, it's still just to the north of the Yucatan Peninsula. Pretty small storm right now, but it's really tight around the center. That's why it's still really fast, 155 winds as of 2 p.m. Again, it's expected to weaken as it makes its way, which if there is any good news, that is the good news, that it won't be a Cat 5. Just 2 miles per hour shy of a Cat 5 as of the latest 2 p.m. update on our Tuesday afternoon. Central pressure 923. It's been kind of hovering around there, 929. Earlier, just as it went through an eyewall replacement cycle, it started to gain some strength again as it makes its way through this channel, but it's going to start to weaken as it makes its way towards the Florida Gulf Coast, moving east-northeast around 8 miles per hour, expected to kind of pick up speed. However, we still really don't know exactly when it's going to make landfall. Wednesday night into early Thursday morning, the wee hours, like DeSantis said. Wednesday, strong Category 3 storm, just shy of a Category 4 storm as it makes its way through the Florida Peninsula, and it eventually starts to make its way off into the Atlantic. Still a really large cone for 36 hours away from landfall, 160 miles from Spring Hill all the way down to North Fort Myers. So there is still a lot of room for error with the NHC track. So make sure we're just keeping an eye on every update that comes out. 2 p.m., 5 p.m. the track shifts. Every 6 hours that track shifts. So the next update is going to be coming out at 5 p.m. Storm surge also going to be a major issue with this storm. The good news is for Cedar Key and up through the Big Bend that got impacted from Helene is that less than Helene, 3 to 6 feet in Cedar Key, still not very good. I'm 6 feet, and this is the reasonable worst case scenario. So up to 6 feet here in Cedar Key, but as we make our way further down south on the west coast of Florida, I am from right here in West Pasco County. Told my family to get out. They are slowly evacuating now, but up to 15 feet in Tampa Bay as the storm makes its way to landfall. Again, reasonable worst case scenario. We could see up to 15 feet. That's around 3 times my height. That's just life-threatening storm surge, not survivable storm surge, and it's really going to come down to where the storm makes landfall. Worst the storm surge is going to be south of the storm. So assuming it makes landfall right here in Manatee County, Sarasota, Siesta Key, going to see a lot of the storm surge, but still a lot of error for it to change on the NHC track, whether it makes a shift north up to Tarpon Springs, hits Tampa directly, or all the way down into North Fort Myers. The track is still very large. Going to keep an update on it. Wind field is pretty small right now, only 85 miles in diameter just north of the Yucatan. But I said the wind field is going to expand as we head our way into Wednesday night as it starts to interact with some drier and more wind shear. As it makes its way to landfall, 180 miles, so it more than doubles in size of hurricane force winds up from Cedar Key all the way down to Fort Myers. So regardless of where it makes landfall, the hurricane force winds is spanning a larger radius up here in Gainesville as it makes its way further through the state, kind of looking through Orlando right now. It's kind of the center Still going to be seeing some tropical storm force winds that are sustained. That's above 39 miles per hour. We could also see up to 75 miles per hour sustained winds. That's hurricane force winds as it makes its way through. Here's the dry air that I was talking about off into the northwest. This is kind of what's dictating it right now. Right now, it's still able to hold its shape because it's all over that nice moist air for it. But as it starts to interact with this dry air, some of the dry air is going to start to get wrapped into the storm, which is why it's going to really expand into size, really going to be causing a lot of problems widespread throughout the entire state. So again, Pasco County here, that's where I'm from, could see winds. These are sustained winds of 111 miles per hour or more. Major hurricane there. Bringing it closer here in Gainesville, though, we could see 58 to 73 mile per hour storm force winds into our area. And really just as we head into tomorrow and into Thursday is when we're going to start to see these impacts. Likely going to be another night landfall. If that makes matters worse, I don't know what does.
Well, thanks, Matthew. And we will have a full recap on Governor DeSantis' press conference tonight at 5.
Thank you for joining us. We now return to your regularly scheduled programming.